Well, good morning, everyone. And it is my distinct pleasure this morning to introduce to you the Premier, the Honorable Kathleen Wynne. Realize that Premier Wynne needs no or little introduction to our AMO delegates. We've come to know each other reasonably well as a former Transportation Minister, Aboriginal Minister, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and at first, the Minister of Education. She has attended every AMO conference as a Minister of the Crown, and each of her 3 years as the Premier of Ontario. It is safe to say that she knows AMO very well. She sees value in conversing. She respects our work and our efforts to inform her and her cabinet colleagues. We all know that the provincial-municipal relationship is critically important to all of us. We need to understand and appreciate that it can be both delicate and also resilient. When we agree, it is great. When we don't, well, it doesn't mean we stop talking. It means we start working on other priorities that matter to all of our communities and our residents. And there are still matters on our list, and we will continue to talk, explore, and I hope make further progress. This year, the Premier wants to do things a bit differently. She will offer brief formal remarks and then move to a moderated Q&A where she will take questions directly from the audience. Please now also, I'd like to introduce Craig Pearson from the Windsor Star, who will be doing the questions to the Premier. So I welcome Craig Pearson to the stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct pleasure to introduce to you and welcome to Windsor, Essex, the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for everything.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you so much. And Gary, thank you for everything that you've done for the people of the province. Thank you for your time as the president of AMO. And honestly, we couldn't have accomplished as much as we have without your leadership. So thank you very, very much. So it's great to be back here with you. Thank you for having me, and I want to just say that it's a great pleasure always to be able to meet with you. Now we're going to have a Craig's just taking my picture. There she is standing. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A because I'm not able to be here for the Bear Pit, and I wanted to have a chance to hear from you directly. So we'll get going. I'm going to make some short remarks, but first I'd like to acknowledge that and express my respect for the history and the contributions of the First Nation and Métis people of Ontario, and particularly the Anishinaabe people. Je veux aussi saluer les communautés voisines de la Première Nation de Caldwell et de la Première Nation de Walpole Island, souligner la longue histoire des Premières Nations et des Métis en Ontario et leur témoigner mon grand respect. So last week, and I look out here and I see a number of you who I saw last week, I was in about 18 communities all over the north. I talked during that time, as I do, about how our plan is building Ontario up. But mostly I was listening because that is a very important part of my job. And quite frankly, it's the only way that I believe that we actually develop the best policy. I need to hear about your challenges, and I need to then find solutions with you that'll make a real difference in people's lives. And the press in the north kept asking me about why I was there and why I was traveling. And I said that because even though I get regular updates, and we have 4 northern ministers who sit at our table, I need to understand the nuance of policy implementation on the ground. I need to hear those challenges from every corner of the province. And the only way to do that is to connect with people where they live. And that's why I first got involved locally as a school trustee. In elected politics. And then when I made the jump to provincial politics, it was to bring and to find local solutions to be able to bring them to the table. And that is what still drives me. I therefore have an enormous amount of respect for the work that you do as local leaders. You know your communities, you understand their needs, and you're able to articulate them. So that's why this meeting, this gathering every year is so important. So 2 years ago at AMO, I gave 3 criteria for our partnership. I talked about working together on long-term projects. I talked about the respect that we have for each other by understanding each other's perspective and how that respect grows as we have a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives. And third, that we are prepared as we come to the table to make compromises. And then I laid out a number of issues that would test our partnership. So before we get into the fireside chat without the fire with Craig, I want to quickly update you on how I think those principles are helping us to build a province and a community and across the province that is fair to everyone. And at the same time is on a path to fiscal sustainability, because obviously that's critically important for all of us. And at the same time provide the services that people need in all of our communities. I'll talk first about infrastructure. When I became Premier, even though we had been making investments in infrastructure, we were still at a pretty difficult breaking point in the infrastructure development in the province. So we came up with a plan to make the largest infrastructure investment in Ontario's history. Now, for some municipal partners, that means historic investments in transit. For others, it means better roads, new bridges. But for everyone, it means new and upgraded hospitals, schools, and other assets that have an impact on the well-being of the people who we all serve. As I listened to you, we came up with a $100 million fund, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. That was in response to the challenges that you had put forward for predictable, adequate funding. Since we launched OSIF, that fund just 2 years ago at AMO, we've gone farther. We've increased the funding, and we've also increased the formula base as you asked us to do. So we've tripled that funding from $100 million to $300 million when it's fully realized, and increase the formula. Between now and 2019, OSIF then will transfer $670 million of infrastructure money directly onto the books of 426 communities. Now, 3 years ago, that number was 0. And the same is true of Connecting Links. We've put in place a permanent Connecting Links fund. One of the challenges with the Connecting Links money was that it was not predictable. We never knew from year to year whether it was going to be available. You couldn't count on it. And so now it is there, and it's been increased to $30 million. Has this entirely bridged the gap? No, it hasn't. I know that. But is it narrowing the infrastructure gap? It absolutely is. Nous n'avons pas éliminé le déficit dans l'infrastructure, mais nous le réduisons sans cesse. Bridging the gap is also why last year in Niagara, I told you that we needed a real federal partner on infrastructure. I even campaigned for that partner, as you know. And today our new federal government has followed the province's lead. They've created new funding streams to partner with communities on your infrastructure needs. Negotiations are going well, and that's very important. We're eager to announce a deal and get shovels in the ground. So, because of that, I'm very pleased to tell you that Ontario will open the intake for your municipal projects to apply for Phase 1 of the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund and the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund, the CWWF, early in September. Those intakes will happen. J'ai le plaisir de vous dire que l'Ontario commencera à accepter au début de septembre les demandes pour vos projets municipaux dans le cadre de la première phase du Fonds pour l'eau potable et le traitement des eaux usées et du Fonds pour l'infrastructure de transport en commun. For CWWF, we'll use a formula similar to OSIF to fairly allocate the funds to every municipality with water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. Most will be able to fund their share of these new investments using their recently expanded OSIF allocations, but we will work to make more support available where that's not going to be adequate by including an appropriate provincial contribution to the municipal 50% contribution. And so that's over and above what the province is already providing through the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. And what we're doing is we're looking at funding available under Moving Ontario Forward and some of the other infrastructure programs to expand provincial support where required to up to 25% for eligible recipients under the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund. In early September, we'll also launch the intake process for the Federal Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, and we're working with the federal government and the municipal partners to announce the details as we move towards that intake. We know that we can accomplish more when we work together, and I think a really great example of that is the progress that's being made on community hubs. I want to thank those of you who have already been involved. Karen Petrie, as you know, is leading that project for us. We're maximizing all of the resources of our communities, whether they're municipal or provincial, and we are, as a province, we are putting some funding in place to help that process along, because we know that community hubs are critical to bringing services together and using spaces that are public spaces to serve Ontarians and the municipalities that they live in. So again, I thank you for working with us on that, and I ask you to keep working with us as we work with municipal leaders and with school boards and with health institutions to find ways to maximize those public spaces and services. I've also heard from your association about the challenge of providing 21st century services with a 19th century revenue toolkit. It requires you to rely heavily on property taxes. I've heard that. You've told us that even with the increases that we've made to provincial transfers for infrastructure or to upload services back to the province, and these are changes that add up to billions of dollars for municipal budgets every year. Even with all of that, we still haven't bridged the gap. To do your jobs most effectively, you've said that municipalities need to be able to raise more revenue themselves and from streams more diverse than property taxes. I know we've discussed revenue tools at this conference before. I see that there are a number of sessions on the agenda on fiscal sustainability this year, so I know that you're going to be having more of this conversation. And I want you to know we're still very open to having that discussion with you. I want to keep hearing as we fine-tune the challenge here. So let's face it, this is a very, very important dialogue, and it's one that AMO's been having more broadly with its membership. And as we come to the 2018 date, the end of the sort of agreement that we had in place, I know that you're looking at what's next Ontario, and I think that this discussion is part of that. And I'll be honest with you, we have heard a real diversity of opinions from the municipal sector and from other stakeholders on the issue of revenue tools. And so we want to take more time to allow you to collectively determine what's required to make municipalities of all types and sizes financially sustainable in the future. Because there is not one solution that fits all, and so we need to consider how to get this very important decision right for everybody. So at this AGM and in the months ahead, I hope you'll put those specific tools that you're thinking about on the table, take them home, have the public discussion with your constituents and your councils, and then together we can look for a consensus. I'll be working with your incoming President, Lynn Dolan, and through our relationship at the AMO MOU table. And when our government hears what that consensus or near consensus on the specific ways you want to raise additional revenues for your community, we'll work with you in a transparent and an open way to make those additional tools available. And I'll make sure that we're continuing to work with you in that respectful way that we have developed. So long-term projects, respect for each other, compromise. We have a lot on the go, but I think that these principles are taking us in a very good direction, and I appreciate the partnership that we have developed. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to move over, and Craig and I are going to have a bit of a discussion. Thank you very much. Merci, miigwech. Thanks, Craig. So I guess this mic is on now. Yes?
I hope so.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, first of all, for coming to Windsor.
Thanks, Craig.
We are Ontario's comeback kid. We had 10% unemployment rate. Now we're down to 6.2 and falling. So
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's fantastic.
also, they drilled into my head backstage that I must not go over time. We're almost out of time. Thank you very much. But the elephant in the room is skyrocketing hydro rates. How can Ontario municipalities possibly compete with such high costs?
So I heard this when I was in the north. I heard it when I was last in Windsor a few weeks ago. So we've made massive investments in our electricity sector. You know, when we came into office, we had a degraded system that had not been maintained, that had not been built up. We've built, for example, over 10,000 kilometers of transmission line, and there are still communities that need more of that infrastructure to be built. We have a 90% carbon-free electricity grid. So there's a cost associated with that, and we understand that. We've put programs in place, Craig. So this is essentially the answer to your question. We've put in place the Ontario Energy Support Program for people who live on low income. We've put in place industrial rates to help businesses, large industrial, all over the province and in the north. So we've tried to put in place programs that help people to deal with those electricity prices. But I will say that we're still hearing that that's not enough, and so the Minister of Energy, Glenn Thibeault, knows that part of his mandate is to try to find ways to mitigate those costs for people across the province.
Well, while we're on the topic of rising costs, what about police? Yes or no, do you think that the arbitration system is broken or working? And what do you think the solution is?
I think that there is a lot of disagreement on what needs to happen with the arbitration system. We've been trying for a number of years to find a way to evolve the system so that it is fair to everyone. I think that there are changes that need to be made in terms of timing, clarity of decisions, rationale for decisions, and so we're still engaged with the municipalities and with, quite frankly, the employee groups on how we can do that. I think there are things that we can do. Are we going to scrap the system? No. I think that obviously there are challenges, but I think there are changes that we can make that will make it better.
You mentioned the Federal Infrastructure Fund. Could you commit today to allowing municipalities to spend that money the way they see fit?
Well, I think, you know, all the municipalities are engaged in terms of the projects. They all, you know, look around this room, and we've got asset management plans across the province. Everyone knows what the projects are. We're in a much better place today than we were 5 years ago in terms of everyone coming to agreement about what those projects are. So I don't think there's going to be much of a conflict about how those dollars are going to be spent. What I said in my remarks was that we've already put in place billions of dollars in terms of infrastructure funding, but we recognize that in some cases there won't be the ability to match the funds that the feds are putting in place, and we're going to work to make sure that that we top up where that's necessary. So I think that it's going to be less about which projects and more about, do we have the resources to actually fund those projects?
Great. I know you wanted to take some questions from the audience, but we're almost out of time. Is there
but you know what? I'm the premier, so I get to say.
Excellent.
We're gonna.
Excellent.
They said I'd be in trouble with Pat Panini, but Pat's right there, and she's just got to sit there till I answer the questions. So.
If anybody can approach the mic, you have to be wearing running shoes to get there in time. Yes, number 2.
Is it really close?
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Liz Huff. I'm from the beautiful township of Leeds in the Thousand Islands. Premier, it's lovely to have you with us. I want to speak to your head and your heart really briefly with a...
I brought them both.
I know you did. Question for rural Ontario. I'm concerned about the sprinkler system requirements on rural retirement homes.
Yeah.
We know there's about 137 of them that have not converted. That's 3,500 beds close to home, as you talked about recently, for rural low-income seniors, and I really hope that you're talking about it.
We absolutely are. It is. This has been raised with me, and I am also concerned, and I think that we're specifically talking about those small homes that can't afford that upgrade. Stay tuned. We're on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we try question mic number 4?
Oh.
Thank you, Priya, for your comments. Colin Best, Town of Milton, Region of Halton. One concern I have, and a number of other high-growth municipalities, we have to have a 10-year capital budget through the Development Charges Act. will you, as Premier, insist on your ministries having a 5 to 10 year budget? Because right now we can't budget growth because we don't know when the schools are coming.
So that's a very good. You know what? I'm going to turn. That's a really good question, and we have legislation that requires us to have a long-term infrastructure plan, and so I think what you're asking for is the level of specificity, because even though we have that plan, and I will say that in terms of whether it's transportation or education, certainly the work is being done in the ministries. It's a matter of how do we roll that out and make sure that you have visibility into that. So I know my ministers are here and they're listening closely. I think that's a really important question. It's not that the work's not being done, and it's not that those projections aren't being made. It's a matter of us working together on the long-term plan. So thank you for raising that.
And how about mic number 1?
Thank you. Grant Purdy, Councillor in Petrolia. My question is regarding the proposed fire medic proposal with the OPFFA. I'm sure you would agree that all Ontario communities deserve an emergency medical service system that both meets and reflects the needs of all of its citizens. Wouldn't it then make more sense to increase supports for a proactive and preventative emergency medical services system and community paramedicine program with a proven track record? And wouldn't it stand to reason that if medical calls are on the rise while fires continue to decrease, as has been stated by the fire union, that those resources be directed to paramedic services rather than fire services, since patient care and transportation are the responsibility and specialty of Ontario's paramedics? So
this is an issue that has been raised with us. We are, you know, my priority is that we do what makes the most sense in terms of safety of people in communities. That's my number 1 priority. So the minister is going to be doing a consultation on what makes the most sense, and we're not moving to make a change unless we can see that there's evidence and that there's a rationale for making a change. So I'm not going to preempt that process, because I think that we have to make these decisions based on the evidence as opposed to the loudest voices or the intellectual arguments. We have to see the evidence and make sure that any change we make is going to make safety better, is going to get services more quickly, both the medical and the fire services get those services more quickly to people who need them.
We are basically out of time. Can we get for one more question?
Let's take the people who are standing at these mics. Yeah.
Number 2.
Thank you, Joanne Vanderheyden, Councillor, Middlesex County, Mayor Strathroy-Caradoc. Bill 73, Smart Growth for Our Communities Act. This contains 2 specific areas of concern that weaken, I believe, local planning. Can you please advise why a planning advisory council is necessary when current land use policies already have a high degree of planning in our communities? As well, why is it necessary for municipal councillors to summarize the effect that the planning submissions had on their decision, when this is clearly at odds with the provision contained in the Municipal Act for a clerk to record minutes with or without comment?
So you are now at a level of detail that, because I'm no longer the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Minister of Municipal Affairs, I'm not going to be able to give you, a detailed answer, but you'll be able to ask that question during the bear pit. What I will just say is that if there's duplication and if there's a concern about a burdensome reporting process, we need to know about that and we need to look at it, okay? Thank you.
Number 1.
Oh, we're going to go over here? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
And no, then we'll go over there, yeah. Okay. Who's in charge here?
It's usually you.
Yeah, I know. I relinquish control.
Thank you.
Number 1. All right. Thank you, Premier Wynne. My name is James Duke, Deputy Mayor Bradford West Gwillimbury. We thank you for the investment that your government is making in the infrastructure in Ontario. I'd just like to say that our community alone is doing a $100 million capital investment in our community. And I know you're reviewing the Places to Grow Act, and we are in an area where we're bottlenecked, and we would like a champion to help us support the 404-400 Bradford link. So I was wondering if you could help us champion that growth. We need that road. I know you're investing greatly in Metro Links, and we appreciate that, but we need a champion to help us. And we're meeting with some delegates, some ministers through this conference, so we were hoping that we could have your support and help us put that 404 forward.
So-
I want to tell you that our new president of AMO, Lynn Dolan, is our neighbor to our north, and their community has invested millions of dollars in infrastructure funding also. So.
Yes. So I appreciate you bringing that specific ask forward. I know you're going to be talking with our ministers. I think that it's a perfect example of how there is going to be continued need. It's exactly why we have to have a long-term infrastructure plan. It's exactly why we can't take, you know, a decade off investing. We have to keep investing. We have to keep those plans in place. So I appreciate you bringing that forward as we, you know, as we look at how we're going to continue the build. And you know, I know that part of the province very, very well, and I know that you're growing, and the young families need support. So thank you very much for advocating for them.
Good morning, Madam Premier.
Morning.
Thank you very much for sticking around for some extra questions. Appreciate that. Madam Premier, your remarks, my name is Arif Khan, by the way, a councillor from City of Barrie. Your remarks reflected a need to hear the challenges of the local municipalities, so thank you for that as well. Two questions. One, it's not a matter of if, but whether, but of time, whether marijuana and medicinal marijuana has a devastating impact on at least one family in Ontario with regard to impaired driving. Our chiefs of police neither have the financing, nor the technology, nor the training resources to handle this challenge. Barrie's police chief has clearly stated that there are no roadside devices to test for drug-related impairment.
Yeah.
There is no standard for this testing. Drug recognition officers are without a standard. Even if a driver blows under on blood alcohol levels individually and blows under on a drug level individually, what about the combined impairment standard, the combined effect? So my question is not about the debate of medicinal marijuana in general or the opinions of right or wrong about dispensaries, but rather about the particular public safety issue when it comes to driving impaired.
Yeah.
Our police are at a severe disadvantage and our public is at risk of that disadvantage, and I'm wondering if your government will prioritize that and when. And lastly, my question, I have a separate question just with regard to our municipal budgets carrying approximately 50% of the share in court services personnel when it's a provincial matter, and that has an impact on their ability to service their needs at a local level.
Wow.
So on the court services, I'd like you to take that up with the minister, if you could do that. On the marijuana issue, I will say that this is actually, you know, I get asked about the revenue all the time, but I actually am more concerned about the regulation and the social norms around recreational marijuana. And you're absolutely right, there are no roadside tests. We don't have that technology. So that's something that we're making very clear to the federal government, and whenever I've been asked about it, I say, you know, we need instruction from the federal government on what their expectation is of municipalities and how we're going to develop those technologies. So I think we have to move cautiously on this, quite frankly, because we don't have enough of those pieces in place. And I will, you know, when I've been asked about how the distribution should work, and I've talked about the LCBO, part of that has been that I believe that there needs to be control in place. There need to be regulations that help the general public understand the impact of marijuana, and we don't have enough information yet. So we're going to have to look to the federal government to give us that direction, and quite frankly, I think that we need your voices to be raised in asking for that from the federal government.
Thank you, Madam Premier.
Okay.
I think we have sufficient data from south of the border as well to state that they have seen an absolute and uncontested sort of opinion, or the data states the rise in impaired-related deaths due to the legalization of it. And so it's not a matter of battle of wills between province and feds. I think it needs to be quite clear that it's not an opinion,
right.
Lives are at risk.
But what we do need to ask for is how they expect us to develop, or whether they're going to work with us to develop the technology so we can deal with that evidence.
Thank you, Madam Premier.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig.
I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Craig.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just
Do you want me
hand.
to stand here?
Just yes, please. Well, Premier, thank you so much. And I know that everyone was listening carefully in the hall on your comments this morning on the infrastructure piece. There's no doubt about your passion and interest in having a thriving Ontario. We share in that our municipalities are the backbone of a strong Ontario. All 444 municipalities must strive in our great province. So I would ask the delegates to please join me once again in thanking the Premier, the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, and also Craig Pearson for moderating the question and answer period. But thank you, Premier, for once again being here.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Amy.